Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to Audiobook Dynasty. If you want early access and even more parts for free, make sure to join me on Patreon. The sword/bow fired at blinding speed, with such speed that it distorted even the space around it to hit its enemy. Blue light shot out in a straight line, fast, very fast like a shooting star adorning the sky. No, it is faster than that, as for a moment space itself seems torn in a spiral motion as the blue light rises toward Karna. The son of Surya raised his flames to the limit as he advanced fearlessly against the power of Kalidbulg. The explosion was gigantic, it destroyed everything in its path making a trail of destruction in its path. When the explosion dissipated, Karna was revealed in the middle of it with some scratches and wounds that soon healed and returned to normal. Gilgamesh could only stare in surprise. He had thrown Kalidbulg at Karna's face and it had only come out with scratches. This weapon had already destroyed 3 fucking hills when it was launched and only caused scratches. Karna's armor really was the biggest problem. An armor that caused all damage to be reduced to 1/10. To nullify the power of this armor, Gilgamesh had to resort to overwhelming power. Gilgamesh even considered using sunshine, however Karna is son of the Hindu sun god and therefore immune to fire and heat. The most Gilgamesh could do was the raw power and magic it would grant. Any suggestions? Asked Gilgamesh to his tenants. Maybe use balance breaker, speaks Drake with a suggestion. That's a good idea, speaks Regulus. Arashi said. I won't use balance breaker for a battle like this, you know how disastrous it always is, said Gilgamesh in response. Usually when Gilgamesh used balance breaker it usually ended with a lot of destruction because it was hard for Gilgamesh to control them. So if you use the boost to multiply your power enough to wreak havoc, said Drake. That's a good idea, however it will be tricky if I have to store that much power and I will need at least 4 boost and that's 40 seconds, Karna won't wait that long, said Gilgamesh to them. How about using Drake's penetrate, says Regulus. No, that will kill him, said Gilgamesh. Exactly, my penetrate breaks through any defense, physical and magical, however when she nullifies that armor the spear will totally pierce his body, there is a reason it is the spear of a chief god, said Drake to them. What about using Varethragna's authority, the golden sword, to cut his deity, says Arashi. That's a good idea, however I don't know the history of Karna well enough to forge the sword, said Gilgamesh. It was a good idea, however to use the golden sword one needed to have enough knowledge of the target. I have an idea, I will solve it, said Gilgamesh to his tenants who were already giving him a headache from all the talking. All this talk lasted only 3 seconds in Gilgamesh's mind. Then Gilgamesh prepared to advance against Karna, who also prepared himself. Gilgamesh prepared to run while activating the Varethragna authority, and chose the incarnation of the raptor, an ability that allows its user to move faster than lightning. Everything around Gilgamesh went in slow motion as he entered another dimension. Normal people would be in slow motion, and Karna seemed to be able to perceive Gilgamesh, although Karna's speed was extremely slow. At that moment Gilgamesh turned into red lightning, and in an instant Gilgamesh was in front of Karna. In an instant Gilgamesh undid the raptor authority, making Karna's eyes widen at seeing Gilgamesh in front of him. The King of Heroes closed his fist as he activated another of the 10 incarnations, the bull. Gilgamesh punched Karna, who used his spear to defend himself. The impact was deafening, the space seemed to crack with the super strength that the incarnation of the bull granted it. Karna was hurled meters away across entire mountains before coming to a stop. Gilgamesh gave Karna no time to think before lifting Gungnir high into the air. The sky darkened and rumbled as lightning surged in it through the long Inu's zenith tempest. Gilgamesh further increased the power while activating another of the 10 incarnations, the goat, that allows its user to manipulate lightning and thunder. In an instant all lightning was increased by Gungnir's divine power. When Karna stood up from the crater he was sent into, he couldn't help but stare. From the sky tens of thousands of bolts of lightning and thunder descended upon Karna. The entire sky of the dimension darkened as Gilgamesh fired an infinite amount of lightning, whether divine or of nature, whether produced by his long Inus or by the Varethragna authority being driven by the divine power of Gungnir. It was really like watching the end of the world many times over. The land and the sea split under his attack and power. The mountain arched and disintegrated like pieces of paper that burned, the sky itself tore and darkened as all possible lightning struck Karna. Gilgamesh lowered his spear, making all the lightning stop as he watched the mountain Karna had been thrown into. Or what the mountain was, for now the entire mountain region was nothing but barren desert where nothing else could be born. From the rubble of the mountain emerged Karna. His body had several injuries, not fatal or very serious, but injuries that would bother him. Karna knew that the only way to defeat Gilgamesh would be if he released one of his noble phantoms. Karna prepared to advance, however in an instant Gilgamesh appeared in front of Karna with his body emanating a white light and his fist in a sphere of light. Holy fist of the white god! Gilgamesh simply punched Karna, who defended with his spear, but the moment Gilgamesh's fist collided with Karna's spear the son of Surya's eyes widened as he felt his body growing weak before he was sent flying. Karna quickly took his position and skidded off before looking at his skin and seeing that he was leaking blood. Then Karna realized what that light somehow had the God Slayer attribute. This attribute basically gave its user the ability to cause great damage to divine beings. It was like holy magic for devils, and this would be very problematic for Karna, who was a demigod. Being hit by a few more of these would be very bad. Karna's eyes widened as he looked forward and saw dozens of light arrows advancing against him. Karna quickly swung his spear with supernatural mastery, causing all the light beams to be nullified. Karna's eyes widened as he looked up to see Gilgamesh floating in the air. "Howl of the White God!" roared Gilgamesh as he threw a huge beam of light at Karna. Karna quickly put his spear in front of him and released his flames, but Gilgamesh's light swept through everything as if it was purifying the darkness. Karna swung his spear and completely dispelled Gilgamesh's light, and looking forward he saw the King of Heroes smiling as he stared at him. Gilgamesh raised his hand, and at that instant a great bolt of lightning fell exactly on his hand and formed in the form of a blue sphere of lightning. Gilgamesh smiled as he pulled the lightning bolt as if he were throwing it, causing the orb to take the form of lightning. The lightning burst into electricity as Gilgamesh mixed the power of the Ram incarnation together with the power of the lightning devil slayer magic, making the power of the lightning increase even more. "Gi-Balg," said Gilgamesh in a whisper. Everyone could be confused when Gilgamesh whispered the name of the Celtic cursed weapon, while holding the lightning bolt. And at that moment Gilgamesh hurled the lightning bolt. At a speed faster than sound, the bolt traveled across the entire battlefield towards Karna. Obviously the invincible hero dodged the blow and prepared to go after Gilgamesh, but his eyes widened when he saw something. To everyone's perplexity, the lightning suddenly changed its trajectory and headed toward Karna. This happened due to the chance being set by Gilgamesh with the long Inu's telos karma. Gilgamesh granted the lightning the properties of the Celtic cursed spear by altering cause and effect. Using this, he granted the lightning the ability that when it is hurled it will always strike the enemy. Karna had no more chance to escape when the lightning was basically in his face and exploded. Gilgamesh made the lightning explode before it hit Karna's heart because he didn't know if it would be able to pierce his armor, but he didn't want to test that hypothesis. The lightning explosion caused an entire mountain behind Karna to be vaporized as the hero of the invulnerable was thrown against a mountain. When the dust subsided, Karna came out of the dust with some injuries. Gilgamesh had to admit, Karna was very tough even without his armor and had admirable willpower. The son of Surya was resisting all of Gilgamesh's blows. Gilgamesh quickly summoned Gungnir and Karna made flames appear on his spear before advancing again. Just as they were about to meet, however, they were immobilized. Gilgamesh and Karna's eyes widened as they saw several chains all over their bodies, and they were sealing their divine powers. They both turned their gaze to the source and saw Enkidu looking at them seriously. "I think you two have understood each other well enough," Enkidu said seriously as he pointed behind them. When they both turned their gaze back, they saw that the battlefield, once a beautiful plain, was now nothing but a totally destroyed barren desert where no life could live. "Perhaps we have overreacted," said Gilgamesh, receiving a nod from Karna. As they turned their gaze to Enkidu, they saw Sabas with an irritated look on his face as he snapped his fingers, and Arturia with an angry look on his face as he held Excalibur in his arms. Let's not overreact," Gilgamesh said nervously. Sabas and Arturia started to get closer. Gilgamesh admits he had never felt this much fear in his life. Even Karna was a little afraid. 1. All that could be heard afterwards were Gilgamesh's cries of pain. 2 days later. Unknown location. As promised by the witch herself, Arthur came face to face with Walburga once again while standing in the same area they had met, a grassy land with hills in the background, and also a mountain further back. Elifei was nearby, sensing the tension in the air. She knew it might not end well, so she was preparing to defend her brother if she needed to do so. "So, Arthur, what's it going to be?" Her sadistic tone had not lost its touch. Arthur crossed his arms. "I have read what you have written, and I cannot say that I agree with what you are representing before me. Even if I understand what you have written and can grasp the idea behind it, the method of achieving those goals is not in line with the way I wish to live my life, so for that, I simply cannot simply join you." Walburga's face bowed downward. "Really? Didn't you read what you got?" "Yes, and it's a tempting offer. But the price for them is not something I care about." Walburga's scowl became familiar on her face. "Then that's not good. Lider Sama will be unhappy about it. Won't you reconsider?" Arthur shook his head. "No, that is not something I wish to reconsider. I simply cannot do that." Walburga showed a sadistic smile on her lips. "Then die." Immediately, she put her hand forward and cast several spells against Arthur. Fire, wind, lightning, light, and darkness began to flow forward and shoot at him. Elifei panicked, but Arthur just cut the spells off and unleashed a dense wave of holy power, which obliterated the spells in an instant and kept going towards her body, while she activated a plethora of magical defense spells, blocking the holy power, but managed to break down some of its barriers. Walburga wagged her finger. "That's not good. But that sword is good. So if you want to become better acquainted with my blade, keep attacking me. Otherwise, leave immediately." "As if I would." Walburga put her hand up to the sky, forming many magic circles, and she went to release her power, when Arthur stabbed his blade into the air. Walburga was suspicious, but then she saw that the sword was passing through some kind of tear in space. The sword came out above the magic circles and released more of the sacred energy of his famous sword of the Sacred King, Caliban. The sword energy rained down and destroyed the spells instantly, going straight into the young woman's body. She quickly activated a transport circle, disappearing in an instant. She then reappeared behind Arthur, who anticipated that the woman would move backwards, and moved his weapon towards her, cutting her, but she just blocked the intense sword with a multitude of barriers, the pressure of the attack breaking several barriers, but kept Walburga safe and sound. The ground around them began to shatter due to the immense power Arthur released. Interesting, you defended yourself against my sword. You must be good at using magic, witch. And you are fast, but I was trained by the best. Walburga summoned ice from the ground, which rose into a large pillar, forcing Arthur to leap into the air. His speed was so fast that Li Fei couldn't keep up with him, not even Walburga fully, who eventually turned just in time to see that Arthur was already advancing toward him. Don't mess with me. She unleashed many fireballs of magic circles. But Arthur's speed, along with his sword, managed to cut through all the fireballs in seconds and throw a good chunk of holy aura at Walburga at the same time, who was forced to block the power. Shit! Walburga saw her barriers breaking down, so she quickly turned her attention to the swordsman himself and combined a transport spell, along with some magic elemental spells, which formed around Arthur in a few seconds. Li Fei looked stunned. Using that kind of magic together without much preparation time, if any, she's amazing. She's very skilled. I can see why she is valued in her group for doing a task like this. But still, Ani-sama not weak. She thought to herself, as Arthur calmly began to gather holy power into his blade. Witch, you are skilled, but I cannot lose here. He spun his blade like a propeller and released his full aura as Walburga released her magical abilities. Arthur's blade moved in such a way that his sword cut the spells without touching his body or causing the spells to hit him after they were cut. Walburga was astonished at the sudden use of her blade. Arthur was definitely skilled in many areas. No one could complain about that. I see, so you are able to keep up with my magic. That's not good, I could be seriously in trouble here. She pretended to be afraid, but then showed a sadistic smile and announced, I understand you. And then she snapped her fingers, revealing some magic circles in the air around Arthur. Li Fei recognized them and choked. Ani-sama. They are binding spells. Binding spells. Arthur suddenly felt the spells enveloping him in their aura. The power of the binding spell was strong enough to force his body to lock in place, while Li Fei felt more and more worry enter his body. She moved forward when Arthur cast a calm look at her. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Li Fei didn't know what he was talking about. But then she saw that his blade had already sunk into a gap at the tip of the blade. From above Walburga, the tip of the sword came out and unleashed a suppressed aura that it held within its blade, down on the unsuspecting Walburga, who felt the intense power washing over her body and threw her to the ground. She lay on the ground and lost her power of binding spells for a moment. But that moment allowed Arthur to break free from the bonds of magic, throwing him to the ground and attacking Walburga stranded. Growling, she moved on. When a hand came out and grabbed Arthur's blade. Arthur's eyes widened, turning to see a mysterious man inside a cloak. But he could see his eyes under the cloak, and it seemed as if a shiver had enveloped his body. I didn't even detect your presence until that moment when your hand caught my blade. Leader-sama. Why you didn't have to come here? I was just going around. The leader showed a charismatic smile that only Walburga could see. Don't worry about it, Walburga. You did very well. Sometimes we can't help it if allies don't want to join us. Even if it's for a good cause. He, you're right. Well, I'm glad you came. I was sweating a bit, your abilities are no joke, and even for a normal human, your speed is amazing. Even I felt the waves of power coming off him. He's not a joke, Leader-sama. The leader waved his hand and sent Arthur away with a blow from a good distance. The air pressure around the blow alone made Li Fei fall to the ground, and this was after she had created a series of barriers to defend herself, so the power behind his blow looked fantastically frightening in her eyes. Ani-sama. Li Fei looked up with a stunned expression, seeing Arthur being thrown away so easily by this mysterious man. Li Fei then saw Arthur stand up quickly, pointing his blade at the mysterious man. I don't know who you are, but I felt your waves of power coming from here. You clearly hold a power that is not a normal level of power that I have dealt with so far. What exactly are you? Arthur said this clearly. His eyes focused on the face of the man he could not see. But he could feel those cold eyes on him. Arthur Pendragon, it is a pleasure to officially meet you. I am surprised that you and Walburga are fighting. I thought you might like to join our side. I have offered to give you any holy sword you request. Even the so-called missing Excalibur ruler. Yes, I received that information as well. However, I do not agree to hurt innocent people. You can speak beautifully, but they are full of darkness, your words contain no emotion. But if you can hide your intentions from me, then you are quite skilled. Arthur, I don't want this to end in your defeat. I want to do it the hard way. Arthur was surprised that he spoke this way. People usually did it the easy way, at least that's what Arthur had found out before. But this man, whoever he was, seemed to enjoy being challenged. The hard way? What's the easiest way? You'll find out if the hard way doesn't get my achievements. I prefer people to follow me of their own free will. Not because I force them into my control, well, people I respect anyway. I respect your power and your family. Don't make me defeat you. Arthur did not move. His breathing stopped for a few moments. The way he looked at Arthur. Arthur definitely knew that there was something about this guy that was dangerous, so he quickly closed the distance and summoned a large amount of holy aura. Even Li Fei hadn't seen Arthur summon this amount of energy before, and he swung it toward the man within seconds. But he simply put his hand out and slapped the power to the right side, releasing a massive amount of aura that collapsed several medium-sized grassy hills, and even left a large gash inside a mountain in the distance. Arthur and Li Fei couldn't be more surprised. And he just threw it away. Li Fei brought his hands to his mouth as Arthur narrowed his eyes. Have at it. Changing tactics, Arthur attacked the man repeatedly, from all the places he could. Left, right, up, down, side to side, he mixed different types of techniques that Arthur thought he would be able to make hit the opponent's body. But that's not how it happened. The man just used his power to deflect every sword strike he encountered. The way he moved was elegant. The way he deflected the attacks on his form was beautifully executed. Even Arthur could not see a weakness in the man's form. When Arthur pulled back and stabbed to the side, the man merely raised 2 fingers, catching the blade coming at his head through the gap in the space between said fingers, and held it in place with incredible strength. Walburga flashed a sadistic smile that caused shivers to run down Li Fei's spine. I told you, you should have joined us. Arthur's eyes narrowed, trying to pull back his blade, but the man's grip was so strong that Arthur couldn't hold it back. Arthur, one last chance to join me. If you refuse, then I cannot be held responsible for what will happen to you. Arthur didn't like the sound of that. But he also had his sister to think about. Her safety was more important than anything, and he didn't think this man would just let them go so easily. Then he took a stance and turned to Li Fei. Li Fei, get out of here. Oh Ani-sama? What do you mean? Just for my sake. Arthur nodded, which puzzled the leader a little. Leave it to me, go and keep yourself safe. But dash. Li Fei. He said this in a clearer voice than before, you need to escape, it is very dangerous around here. This opponent is not common, I don't think I can beat him. That's why you need to escape now. His eyes went to the mysterious leader who was just watching calmly, you're not attacking me. I was waiting for you and your Imuto to finish. No matter what you wish, if you try to escape, Walburga will attack you, miss. You can also be useful, I can see that you have many magical abilities, and I wonder if you know any forbidden magic that I don't? It would be interesting to see your powers. No, you won't. Li Fei. Go now. Arthur leaped forward and landed many blows against the enemy in front of him. He simply extended his hand, covering it with a dense aura, and blocked each shot over and over again, the sword couldn't even cut through the aura so heavy and thick. Li Fei panicked, seeing Arthur being pushed back, and she didn't know what she should do. She couldn't leave her brother. But she knew that the two of them couldn't escape. She needed help. She needed someone's help. But who she could get, she didn't know. With tears coming out of her eyes, she turned her head and began to activate a transport circle. Oh no, it won't. Walburga reached out and tried to use her magic to attack Li Fei. But Arthur managed to unleash powerful waves of holy power from his sword toward Walburga, forcing her to defend against the savage attack, while the leader had a chance at her body, driving a powerful fist into Arthur's torso. Gwa! He spat out a good amount of blood as he fell to the ground, feeling sicker by the second. Li Fei's startled eyes turned to Arthur, who, despite having just been punched, still smiled gently at Li Fei. With a flash of light, she disappeared with deep regret in her mind. She definitely felt as if she had just run away from her older brother, and it made her feel bad inside her body. Walburga clicked her tongue. Damn magician, she got away. No matter, I'm sure she'll show up back eventually. Maybe she has some interesting allies to join us. His eyes turned to Arthur, who was writhing in pain on the floor. But more importantly, we managed to get this man here. His skills will no doubt bring a good deal of power to our group in formation. Arthur's hateful eyes turned to the leader himself, whose malicious grin was growing wider and wider. The man's hand moved closer to Arthur's face with more and more feelings rising to the surface. Arthur definitely knew this now. He couldn't escape it. With Gilgamesh. It had been 2 days since Gilgamesh had summoned Karna, and since then the son of the sun god had been living in Gilgamesh's house and had his own room and had also been given new, more ordinary clothes. Everyone also got used to Karna's presence. He usually stayed quiet in his corner and rarely spoke unless someone asked. Gilgamesh also trained more with Karna and improved his skills. Gilgamesh was currently in his home as he lay on the couch with Fenrir's head in his lap while stroking the god-devouring wolf. Sabas, Arturia, Mordred, Asia, Valerie, and Karna had gone out shopping, which Gilgamesh did not see the need for so many people. From the looks of it he wanted to show the city to him. Tiamat was working with Ajuka and so was in the underworld, and Inkija was looking for some books in his room. Gilgamesh continued to watch until a growl caught his attention. Fenrir stood up in an alert position and stood in front of the door as he increased his power. Gilgamesh went to the door and signaled to Fenrir, who quieted down. When Gilgamesh opened the door, his eyes widened as he saw who the two people were. They were two women. The one on the right has red eyes, long black hair tied in two tails with two black ribbons. On top of her head is a black and gold tiara, along with a gold neckband and matching O-shaped earrings. Her clothes are very revealing, with the top being a white bra with a gold outline that exposes some of her cleavage along with her lower back and belly. On her buttocks is a jeweled black gold thong that tucks deeply between her buttocks and exposes a large part of her buttocks and legs. She also wears a black stocking on her right leg with gold trimmings, and her left ankle has a gold bracelet. Her left arm is equipped with a black and gold glove that covers her forearm, while her left arm has a gold bracelet around the arm. The one on the left was a woman with two absurdly beautiful reddish eyes, which have rounded features and, in addition, you can see a black outline. She apparently has blonde hair, which is quite long. She is wearing a dark blue dress with black details and two bows in her hair. Gilgamesh recognized that they were, but still cannot help but be surprised. Look, isn't that the golden one had a descendant? Spoke the black-haired woman. That's right, exclaimed the blonde-haired woman in surprise. Who are you? Asked Gilgamesh, although he already knew, he had to stay in character. Ah yes, bow mortal and worship me, for I am the great queen of heaven, the great goddess Ishtar, said Ishtar with a huge smile while the other shook her head in denial. I am Ereshkigal, the goddess of death and queen of Kur, said Ereshkigal politely. So you will let us in? Descended from the golden one? Asked Ishtar as she crossed her arms. Gilgamesh did the first thing that came to mind. He closed the door. Unknown location. Arthur, sitting before the man who had captured him, could not move. His arms were bound and his sword was taken from him, and locked inside very complex magical seals that even he had not seen before, even with Eli Fei. Whoever made them was clearly not a wimp. It was as if he was trying to provoke him with his sword, being right there, in the same room, but he was out of reach. He couldn't even use his powers with the sword. Then the man holding him advanced, running his hand through his hair. Hello, Arthur. You simply could have followed me, but you are forcing me to take control of you. TCH, you captured me, but you didn't take my sister. Are you worried about that? Worried about the little sorceress? Hardly. She'll show up sooner or later, and when she does, I'll bring her in. But I was there for you, Arthur. Your skills in wielding a blade, though not completely polished, will be a good asset to my growing group. I like to find unique and interesting people to be by my side. Like your witch. Arthur spat, not wanting to give this man any kind of satisfaction. In fact, although he could not see the man's face, Arthur knew that dark intentions awaited him, but he simply did not care. Walburga, she has her uses. She is not in the upper echelons of my group, but she is very knowledgeable about a variety of people and has several connections that are good for someone like me. But, ignoring that for the moment, aren't you happy to be one of the first guinea pigs for me? I've been perfecting my technique for a while now and I'd like to see how you are able to resist, and what I need to do to adjust. Need to do to adjust? Arthur muttered without quite understanding what he was talking about. Some technique that needed to be perfected? How would he be a guinea pig? What was going to happen to him? Don't worry, Arthur, you are precious to me, I won't hurt you. Arthur thought this was ridiculous at best. Then why did you capture me? What exactly are you going to do with me? Experiment on me? What kind of experimentation are you going to do on me? Does it have to do with the sacred sword Caliban? Caliban and experimentation, huh? I hadn't even considered that. That could be interesting, infusing the power of a sacred sword into a body. Maybe I'll do just that. Thanks for helping me with Arthur Kun. Although his tone was playful, Arthur felt a darkness in his voice. It was scary. Creepy. He could feel it sending shivers down the man's spine. What do you want with me? Asks Arthur. Honestly, there is something that I and my allies want, however even if all my allies and I get together we won't get it, because she is too well protected, informed the man. And what makes you think I will get it? Asked Arthur. The man stared for a moment before starting to laugh to Arthur's surprise. Oh, I don't think so, you clearly won't be able to beat him. You may be the descendant of the King of Knights, but the one protecting her is the king of heroes, said the man to Arthur, who widened his eyes. You want the Secretary, said Arthur. Oh no, I don't want him, although I would really love to have him in my group. He won't accept it, said the man as he walked around Arthur. You know, Arthur, the gods are very greedy, just find a way to increase his power and he will do anything, said the man. Arthur was not understanding a word he was saying. Well, never mind, I was rambling. Don't worry, Arthur, I have many distractions planned to make the plan work. Well, I guess I should tell you what I want since you'll be working for me. I'm not going to help you, Arthur shouts. The man shook his head. You will see that from my manner. Well, what I want, Arthur, is the Holy Grail and you will help me get it, the man said. Arthur didn't understand. I'm not a sadist either, so I don't want any harm to come to you, Arthur Pendragon. Resisting is pointless, right? He joked with Arthur, who was becoming increasingly agitated. He definitely felt worried about what was going to happen next. All he knew was that he would be experienced. But what that meant, he really didn't. With Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh had just closed the door in the face of the two goddesses. Of all the things that could happen, this was certainly not one of them. Gilgamesh never imagined that the Sumerian pantheon would send people after him. As far as Gilgamesh knew, the Sumerian pantheon had isolated itself from the world due to lack of followers. But now they had two Sumerian goddesses at their door. Hey, what are you doing? Open the door, shouts Ishtar angrily. Gilgamesh sighed before opening the door and coming face to face with an irritated Ishtar and a surprised Ereshkigal. So are you going to let us in? Asks Ishtar while tapping her foot impatiently. Gilgamesh smiled and nodded. Ereshkigal stepped in front of Ishtar, much to Ishtar's anger, and entered. Just as Ishtar was about to enter, Gilgamesh closed the door, putting her out. Hey, what do you think you are doing? Shouts Ishtar angrily. Well, Ishtar, my ancestor didn't like you and it seems I have some of his hatred, so I'll just let you in if you speak. Oh great Gilgamesh-sama, allow this miserable, insignificant goddess into your house, Gilgamesh said with a small smile. Ereshkigal were almost laughing as he tried to hold back his laughter. What? Damn it, I'm going to blow this door off, shouts Ishtar as she summons her divine aura. I recommend you don't do that. Don't forget we are in devil territory and if you use your power here it would be the same as a declaration of war and you don't want that, said Gilgamesh to Ishtar, who stopped her divine power. He's right, said Ereshkigal smiling. Shut up, shouts Ishtar. Ishtar took a deep breath and swallowed her pride as she could not fail in this mission. Oh great Gilgamesh-sama, let this insignificant and miserable goddess into your house, said Ishtar as she gritted her teeth in anger, and Gilgamesh and Ereshkigal laughed. Gilgamesh opened the door and revealed Ishtar with an angry look. See, it wasn't so hard, Gilgamesh said smiling. Ishtar entered the house with a look of fury while Ereshkigal laughed heartily. Gilgamesh directed both of them to the living room where they sat next to each other. Gilgamesh sat on the couch and looked at the two as he smiled. So what brings two great goddesses to my home? Asked Gilgamesh, curious. Well, our father and king the god Anu asked us to come here to talk to you, speaks Ereshkigal politely. Then what about? Asks Gilgamesh to her, ignoring Ishtar. Hey, why do you treat her well and I don't, says Ishtar irritated. Well, I like her better, Gilgamesh says to them. Ishtar got an annoyed look on her face while Ereshkigal had a surprised look and a small blush on his face. Why? Asks Ishtar angrily. First of all, she did not destroy my ancestor's life because of a silly thing like rejection, and second, my ancestor had respect for her, said Gilgamesh to the two who had surprised looks on their faces. He respected me? Asked Ereshkigal in surprise. Well, it was little, but it was more than any other god. He respected you because you always fulfilled your duties in his kingdom, said Gilgamesh calmly to her. Ereshkigal looked momentarily surprised before nodding. She was also a little happy about this. She was rarely treated so well and considered better than her sister. Ereshkigal hated how she was hated and suffered as a social outcast, always being inferior to everyone and being lesser than Ishtar. Ereshkigal also never liked how everyone was afraid of her as the dreaded goddess of the underworld. It was comforting that a person saw her that way. One wonders, can you leave your kingdom for so long? After all, you have souls to look after, asked Gilgamesh. Ah, don't worry, although it is true my pantheon has few followers, so I can spend a few days away, said Ereshkigal to Gilgamesh, who nodded. Hey, don't ignore me, shouts Ishtar. However, before Gilgamesh could say anything, a voice was heard. Hey Gil, have you seen my book? Asked a voice as he emerged into the room, which turned out to be Enkidu. Ishtar and Ereshkigal turned their gaze to him and widened their eyes. Aye, is that? Questioned Ereshkigal. Enkidu? Asked Ishtar in surprise. Enkidu's gaze turned to the two and he widened his eyes. Ishtar said Enkidu before his gaze darkened. No one could do or say anything before Enkidu disappeared. At the next moment, Enkidu's foot was on Ishtar's face as the weapon of the gods flew at the goddess of war. In an instant, Ishtar was thrown against the wall, causing her to go through the wall, while Gilgamesh and Ereshkigal stared at it in bewilderment. Enkidu put his feet on the ground and looked at the hole in the wall that Ishtar had made. So it really is Ishtar, said Enkidu with a nod. The next moment Ishtar came out from inside the hole in the wall with an angry expression. Damned if you're alive, I'll kill you, said Ishtar before increasing her divine aura with Inkiju doing the same thing. In a moment when they were about to face each other, chains appeared from golden ripples around them, binding them and sealing their divinities. Both men's eyes widened at this and they turned their gaze to Gilgamesh. They regretted their decision in the same instant as Gilgamesh was looking at them with his crimson eyes glowing in power, making them both swallow dry. Ishtar, if you try anything with Inkiju I will make sure to kill you, and I don't mind going to war with the Sumerian pantheon, Gilgamesh said to Ishtar, who nodded quickly. Gilgamesh turned his gaze to Inkiju. Calm down. Gilgamesh knew that his friend was angry with Ishtar and disliked the goddess because of the things she had done. They both nodded and Gilgamesh undid his chains and Ishtar sat down beside his sister and Inkiju stood behind Gilgamesh alert. I will not ask how he is here, for you would surely not reveal, said Ereshkigal to Gilgamesh, who nodded. Then what was the reason for the visit? Asked Gilgamesh. We have a proposal for you, from our father, spoke Ereshkigal calmly. Gilgamesh raised an eyebrow in doubt. He would like to invite you to join our faction, Ereshkigal said to him, though personally she didn't think he would accept. And refusing is not an option. Any speech Ishtar spoke died in her throat as she looked at Inkiju, who was standing behind Gilgamesh. The weapon of the gods had a serious look on his face with a smile so gentle it seemed cruel as Inkiju's chains began to appear at his side as he made a beheading sign as if Ishtar had said the wrong thing. Both the goddess of war and the goddess of death, especially Ishtar, were breaking into a cold sweat at this as they knew that Inkiju's power was greater than theirs. Gilgamesh turned his gaze to Inkiju and saw his friend normal and smiling amiably. He turned his gaze to Ishtar and asked. What had you said? Asked Gilgamesh. Nothing, said Ishtar quickly. Gilgamesh turned his gaze to them and answered. I refuse your proposal, said Gilgamesh to Ishtar, who was surprised, although Ereshkigal already seemed to know that he would refuse. Why? Asked Ishtar as she stood up. I honestly have no interest in allying myself with anyone, said Gilgamesh to the two. Before Ishtar proclaimed another word, Ereshkigal spoke. Leave Ishtar, he has his decision and we must respect it. And honestly his refusal was almost certain. I'm sure father will understand, Ereshkigal said to Ishtar, who looked at her. I am surprised you want me so badly in your faction. What did they give you to do that? Asked Gilgamesh, curious. What makes you think someone paid me to do that? Asked Ishtar, offended. For you only do things when someone gives you something in return, said Ereshkigal seriously to Ishtar, who snorted. Everyone was silent for a few seconds. Ishtar spoke up. He offered me jewelry. Satisfied, said Ishtar to everyone, who rolled their eyes. Gilgamesh turned his gaze to Ereshkigal, who understood. My father asked and so I did, and it is also a good way to see the real world after centuries, said Ereshkigal with a small, sad smile. Ishtar rolled her eyes while Gilgamesh and Inkiju took pity on the goddess of the underworld. As queen of Kur, Ereshkigal needed to take care of it always, and that's why she lived there. She lived in the underworld since she was born, being forbidden to leave. In this universe she could leave, but only in rare moments. Then let's settle this so we won't say they went empty-handed, Gilgamesh said to the two who looked at him in doubt. Gilgamesh snapped his fingers and next to Ishtar a portal appeared from which emerged a large pile of gold and jewels. These were not the original treasure of the Gate of Babylon but some of the treasure that Gilgamesh had collected during his time of travel. These belonged to the collection of a dragon that Gilgamesh had found and killed. They were only part of the treasure. The moment Ishtar's eyes fell on the treasure, her body seemed to vibrate at the sight of it. What's that for? Asked Ishtar, trying to keep from stuttering. You can keep them, Ishtar, for a taste. I don't want any fights with your pantheon, said Gilgamesh, causing Ishtar's eyes to glaze over. He was buying a goddess to the perplexity of Ereshkigal and Inkiju. Ishtar simply loved jewels more than anything and was willing to do anything for them, however she lacked the golden rule skill and therefore had no luck obtaining them. And now that her pantheon wasn't as worshipped as it once was, she didn't have as many jewels as she used to. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, said Ishtar as she threw herself into the treasures. Gilgamesh turned his gaze to Ereshkigal, who nodded negatively. I don't want jewelry, she said. However Gilgamesh smiled. I will give you something better, Gilgamesh said to her. Gilgamesh put his two hands together and created a great amount of aurum, making everyone's eyes widen at the feeling of such power. Gilgamesh passed the message of what he wanted to do to Arashi. Well, this is something complicated even for me, but if you put in a little of the power of the golden sword, it might work, said Arashi. When all Gilgamesh's aura and concentration dissipated, he opened his hand and a small green seed was revealed there. Gilgamesh held it out to Ereshkigal. When you arrive in Kur, plant it, Gilgamesh said softly. Ereshkigal looked in doubt before speaking. Nothing will be born, no kind of life can exist in Kur, and therefore she would die the moment I put her in the ground, said Ereshkigal as he informed him. Trust me, said Gilgamesh to Ereshkigal. The goddess of the underworld looked at him for a moment before nodding. Ereshkigal took the seed and stored it in his clothes before turning to Ishtar. Let's go. It's about time, father must be worried, Ereshkigal said to his sister, who nodded. Ishtar used her magic to put away all her jewelry and turned to Ereshkigal, who created a teleportation circle. "We will transmit your answer," Ereshkigal said before she and her sister disappeared. After that, Gilgamesh leaned back on the couch and sighed. "I am surprised that you gave her things," said Enkidu as he sat down next to Gilgamesh. "The world has its mysteries," said Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh had given the treasure to Ishtar to see if the goddess would stop bothering him, for surely she would come back to bother him because she thought she was superior because she was a goddess. For Ereshkigal, on the other hand, it was more personal. Ereshkigal is one of Gilgamesh's favorite characters, and even though she is in a universe other than Fate's, that doesn't change. So he was happy if he could help her. The tranquility of Gilgamesh and Enkidu was cut short by Mordred, who almost burst through the door when she and everyone else returned. Gilgamesh smiled as he saw everyone laughing and enjoying themselves again. Kur, Sumerian underworld. Currently in the Sumerian underworld it was possible to see someone walking. The Sumerian underworld, Kur, was like a big cave under the earth that extended for several meters or kilometers. There were corridors made of stones that led to it, and it also had cages with blue flames scattered around, but they weren't flames, but souls of the people who lived there. Who could be seen walking there was its ruler. Ereshkigal, the Sumerian goddess of death and queen of Kur. The goddess of the underworld has two absurdly beautiful red eyes, which have rounded features and, in addition, you can see a black outline. She has blonde hair, which is quite long. Ereshkigal usually wears a considerable amount of accessories on her body, and because of this it is difficult to see all the details present in her clothing and physical constitution. Finally, she is wearing a dark crown, and soon afterwards some objects that apparently serve to attach the aforementioned accessory to Ereshkigal. She wears a cape that has alternative colors, these being pink and gold, and, in addition, a skull-shaped utensil is used to attach it to her clothing. She, in fact, remains wearing something very similar to a dress, which has black and gold coloring. On her legs we can see a kind of anklet, which is apparently black with some yellow aspects and reddish jewelry. It had been some time since Ereshkigal and his sister Ishtar had returned and reported to their father meeting Gilgamesh. The king of the gods did not even look sad, as if he already knew that Gilgamesh would reject his proposal. Currently Ereshkigal was doing her work in the underworld, while she learned that her sister had already had a party with the jewels. Ereshkigal can't help but sigh. Her brief time on Earth was something wonderful that she wanted to continue experiencing, however her happiness faded too soon. It's not as if Ereshkigal didn't enjoy being queen of Kur, however she was envious of her sister who could always do whatever she wanted. When Ereshkigal was getting ready to continue her work, she remembered Gilgamesh's gift. Taking the seed from her pocket, she looked at it. Ereshkigal knew that it would not live. After all, anything planted in Kur would die. It was a true land of the dead. Deciding to do this, she dug a small hole where she buried the seed. Ereshkigal looked for a few seconds and saw that nothing had happened. Sighing, she decided to get back to work and that she should not trust Gilgamesh's words. However, when she turned around she felt a pulse of energy behind her, and when she turned to look she saw that where she had planted the seed a flower had been born. "Impossible!" whispered Ereshkigal in shock. "No plant could live in Kur. When Gilgamesh created this seed he embedded the power of the Zenith Tempest, which allowed the user to manipulate all elemental attributes, and that included nature. However, regardless of the plant, everything would die when it was in Kur, but Gilgamesh made sure that didn't happen. He put some of Varethragna's authority into the golden sword, causing Kur's authority to be nullified and the plant to grow, and he did this at an extremely high rate due to having fed off Gilgamesh's power. Slowly the pulse of energy spread throughout the underworld, causing flowers, trees, and plants to grow everywhere. Slowly the whole Kur turned into a paradise, not a land of the dead, but a place that everyone would like to go to. Ereshkigal could not believe what was happening. She had never liked the very dark appearance of Kur. She had tried to change it several times, but it always returned to a land of the dead. But now it was as she wanted it to be, a paradise and not a gloomy land. Gilgamesh knew this desire of Ereshkigal's, and that's why he granted her this seed. Ereshkigal could only let tears flow from her eyes when she saw the beauty of her home. She was certainly indebted to Gilgamesh. And she would thank him when she saw him again. With Elifei. Because she was separated from her brother, Elifei had limited options. She didn't have many people she could trust, and besides, she knew that if she told certain people what happened to Arthur, they might try to take advantage of the situation. She knew, however, that the heroic faction was interested in having Arthur join, and if she could get them on side, then perhaps she could attempt a rescue, although she would have to find out exactly where they had gone to begin with. Arriving at the hero's faction base, Elifei stepped forward and tried to enter the building, when a thick mist came before her. The mist was so thick that she could no longer see the building, but she knew who was responsible for it. "George-sama, please let me pass. I would like to speak with Cao-sama." Elifei shouted, unable to see George at first. But then, a few seconds later, he emerged from the mist. A boy in his teens, wearing glasses and wearing a modified school uniform, tilted his glasses toward Li Fei and she could feel the coldness of his gaze burning her. Li Fei, where exactly is your Unai-sama? Cao-sama was waiting for an answer. That's why I came here. George-sama, it's terrible, he was captured by a man who had incredible power. Even Unai-sama couldn't do anything against him. George was captivated by this. A power that even your Unai-sama could not fight. Yes, we have to help him. I don't know what will happen to Unai-sama. V, could you help? It all started when a witch named Walburga approached us. George looked confused for a few moments, before slowly exhaling. If they were able to defeat your Unai-sama, then they must be powerful. And even so, we must save him. If we put ourselves in danger for one person, then… Li Fei couldn't believe what she was hearing. George was denying her the chance to save her older brother? But Cao-sama would certainly help if the circumstances were explained. While it may be worth the risk, we don't know this opponent. We can't rush blindly to help your Unai-sama if we don't know what kind of opponent we are dealing with. Arthur is a strong man, Cao-sama even said that he is powerful, so if your Unai-sama lost without being able to do much, then we can't do much better, and we can't separate our forces now to provide assistance. Li Fei didn't know what to say. Cao was even denying him the chance to help his brother? Realizing that she would not get any help from the hero faction, she turned her neck to the side. I understand, if you won't help me, then I will find someone who will. George crossed his arms. And that person is? I don't know yet, but I'm sure there will be someone who will help me find my Unai-sama. I can't leave him in their clutches. Li Fei turned and started to walk away. She knew this might be a long shot. But it was one of the only places she could go now. But if she couldn't get help from the heroic faction, then she had to look deeper. Mount Olympus, Greece. Mount Olympus is the home of the Greeks, one of the main factions of the supernatural world. Currently in a palace in the center of the mountain were 12 chairs, more like thrones, but only one of them was occupied and it was precisely the one in the center. The man who was sitting in it was tall and older looking with white hair and a white beard as well as 2 electric blue eyes and was wearing a toga, a traditional Greek garment. He was Zeus, the king of the Greek gods and god of the sky, of lightning, of thunder, of law, order, and justice. Zeus was sitting on his throne as he thought. A few hours ago he had received a mysterious letter that showed the location of the Sekiruti. Zeus, like all supernatural beings, was very interested in getting Gilgamesh's power on his side, even more so after the powers he demonstrated in the battle against the Phoenix demon. Zeus didn't have to trust the letter, however it was the best clue he had. Zeus reached out his hand and summoned lightning. But not just any lightning bolt. That was Zeus' Master Ray and the symbol of Zeus' power, and it is also the most powerful and dangerous weapon ever made in the Cyclops forges and in all Greek forges. It is from it that all other rays are produced. It was the first weapon made by the Cyclopes for the first war of the gods against the Titans, which cut down the summit of Mount Etna and threw Cronus off his throne. The moment Zeus struck his Master Ray into the ground, the whole sky was darkened as lightning and thunder rumbled. In the next instant a light shone in the throne room and a person was revealed. It was a woman who had silver hair that was carefully tied in a ponytail and her eyes looked like the moon. Her choice of clothing was quite simple, but it took nothing away from her beauty. She had a bow in her right hand. My daughter Artemis, said Zeus in his powerful voice with a thunderous voice. It was Artemis is the goddess of hunting, the moon, chastity, childbirth, and wild animals. Daughter of Zeus with Leto and twin sister of the sun god Apollo. Yes, father, what is the reason for the summons, asks the goddess of the hunt. My daughter, you are the best tracker on Olympus and so I have a mission, said Zeus to his daughter, who nodded. You are to find the Sekiruti, Gilgamesh, and bring him to be an ally to our faction, said Zeus to her. What if he refuses, asked Artemis. That is not an option, said Zeus seriously. Zeus' total confidence in his daughter's abilities. Artemis had a higher power than Satan class and would be able to defeat the Sekiruti. He was a human after all, even the boosted gear or being a descendant of the king of heroes doesn't change that. Yes, my father, said Artemis before disappearing into a golden light. Zeus smiled before disappearing to go find a mortal woman to have fun with. Unknown location. High in the sky, 1 meter tall, covered with golden fur, and with a wrinkled face, carrying a staff-shaped weapon, smoking a pipe, wearing dark glasses, and placing prayer beads on his forehead, sitting on a flying cloud. This was Sun Wukong, the great Buddha victorious in combat, and the great sage equaling heaven. Beside him was a large green Asian dragon. Era Yulong is one of the 5 great dragon kings, known as the evil dragon or jade dragon. Oi! Gigi, who are we looking for again? Sun Wukong sighed as he looked at the dragon taking a deep puff on his pipe, before exhaling a cloud of smoke. I already told you Yulong, the Sekiruti. Akra, the heavenly emperor, has requested that I may contact him. And if possible, persuaded to join Akra's cause to defeat Shiva or destroy him. Sun Wukong told the excited but lazy dragon. 8. I don't understand what you see in Indra, there is nothing special about him. He is extremely arrogant and proud, and that will be his downfall. Besides, he has no way of gathering an army strong enough to overthrow Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. Yulong replied to his fellow traveler. Humph, don't underestimate Akra, he is more powerful than you realize, he is after all the fourth strongest being in the world. Hey, is he really that strong? The only battle of his that I know of is when he killed Vritra, but Vritra doesn't come close to the top 10. Yes, that is true, Akra is so powerful that it would require all the current Satans to rival his strength, replied Wukong. Then he must be a bit stronger than a heavenly dragon class being, said Yulong. Yes, but let's hurry, we need to find this being before someone else does, said Sun Wukong as they increased their speed. The powerful people of the world were moving. And Gilgamesh was their target. A few days later. It had been a few days since Gilgamesh's meeting with the Sumerian goddesses Ishtar and Ereshkigal, and since then the king of heroes had not heard from the Sumerian pantheon. These last days were used by Gilgamesh to better master his skills and his training. Gilgamesh trained mainly his mastery with the sunshine, and for this he had help from Karna, who being the son of the sun god could teach him some things about his power and even teach him some techniques. Karna had already gotten very used to this new world and seemed to be doing well here. The son of Surya was usually quiet in his and rarely spoke. He spent a lot of time with everyone, although he didn't interact much. He had also fought Mordred and Arteria as he was very interested in their power, although he won both battles. Gil was currently in the dungeon as he trained to better his mastery, as he always did every afternoon after coming home from school. The dungeon looked like a large mountain range. It was a dungeon of low-level dragons. Currently Gilgamesh was sitting on top of one of the mountains as he concentrated and looked at the highest one, which was where a boss dwelled. Gilgamesh concentrated while letting his magic power run free as he extended his hand. Trace on, Gilgamesh muttered. Judging the concept of creation. Blue energy began to explode from his hands, glowing and spinning like a wild flame that was uncontrollable. Hypothesizing the basic structure. The wild, untamed blue aura stopped for a moment, as if time around him had stopped, then it started again and began to expand, taking the form of a glowing blue longsword. Duplicating the composition material. The color of steel began to transform around him, the bluish, gaseous aura slowly becoming almost solid and could be grasped now. Imitating the skill of its manufacture. The sacred and light element began to pour into him as Gilgamesh felt his energy being drained. It was a very small amount, not much for Gilgamesh who had a large amount of magical power. Sympathizing with the experience of his growth. Roland. The famous paladin and leader of the 12 peers. A sword that was granted to him by an angel and splendidly forged, as well as Caliban. It proved to be almost indestructible, seeing how Roland's desire to destroy it on the verge of his death to prevent it from falling into the hands of the enemy ended in failure. Reproducing the accumulated years, complete. Overcoming every manufacturing process, complete. The blue flames in his hand slowly formed and were about to take the form of the famous Durandal sacred sword. Keep the energy stable, recreate the form, change the use and. Gilgamesh's eyes widened as he noticed the energy becoming unstable. The beautiful blue sword-shaped flames began to twist and undulate almost like tentacles. Ah shit! Ah shit! Ah shit! Instantly, Gilgamesh made the sword hilt solid, grabbing it quickly and throwing the sword toward the sky hard, and I mean really hard. The unstable sword shot out with incredible speed and. Boom! A blue and yellow explosion about 300 meters long immediately appeared and destroyed everything. It didn't burn, but annihilated, eradicated everything it touched, turning it into nothing but ashes. The radiation shockwave could be felt for more than 2 kilometers. The violent gust of wind hit him. It seemed as if a hurricane was being hurled against Gilgamesh, who was not even affected. As quickly as the blast appeared, so quickly it was gone. The violent blue torrents of destruction didn't exist for more than 7 seconds before they disappeared. The temperature also returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. All the clouds in the sky were parted and a giant mountain had been totally destroyed. Anything solid was nowhere to be seen, as if it had been eaten by a monster. The ground had turned into a huge crater, as if a giant had just stepped into it. The explosion had enough force that even Mu-class beings couldn't survive. That explosion would have been felt by any supernatural entity. Such power would make their radars go off like crazy. Gilgamesh heard a voice behind him, and when he looked he saw Sabas walking with indifference as if he didn't even care about this power. Gilgamesh sighed as he thought about his training. Currently he was training with his skill Unlimited Weapons Works to further increase the strength of his weapons and especially the speed with which they were created and modified. Gilgamesh could create weapons as strong as the original ones, but the speed to create them depended only on himself and therefore the training. And even for Gilgamesh to alter them was difficult. Gilgamesh tried to alter the Durandal and turn it into a weapon similar to Kalidbolg, but it was more than difficult. Gilgamesh was able to alter Kalidbulg and turn it into a projectile and fire it. So why was he having difficulty using it on Durandal? Let's keep it simple. Gilgamesh had the basics of how to use this ability, how to increase its power. He would have to figure that out on his own, although he also had Emiya and Shiro Emiya's memories on how to use this ability. However, all of this was like a book, it was knowledge that he needed to read before he could apply it. Some of the knowledge was easy and he could already use it. Altering Kalidbulg was among that, apparently it was also Emiya's favorite, so the how to alter it and how to design it was already there and I just needed to follow it. But Durandal? No. Let me tell you something, the Unlimited Weapons Works was not like the Babylon Gate. It was not an unlimited place filled to the brim with noble phantasms. The Unlimited Weapons Works was basically a copy of the Unlimited Blade Works. The only difference was that with Gilgamesh's he could create weapons as strong as the original, but its essence didn't change. It was a place that was full of swords, a world of infinite swords, and that was it. Point 2. These swords were mainly noble phantasms rated E or D, if they were. There were also those rated C, and also those who could be considered B or A rated. Durandal was one of them. Apparently Emiya copied this sword when he was fighting the original Gilgamesh. However, it was not used often because it consumed a large amount of prana, not to mention that it was considered a divine construct, something that made it more difficult to trace and create in their world, since Gaia had a strong influence there. Kalidbulg, however, was not a divinely constructed sword. Gilgamesh tried to use the same process to alter Durandal that he did in Kalidbulg, however it didn't work, partly because they were different weapons and Durandal was much more savage. Gilgamesh may have had the Unlimited Weapons Works skill but that was it, he had it, it doesn't mean he mastered it. As with all of Gilgamesh's abilities, the system granted him the ability to perform them and showed him how to use them. But this did not mean that Gilgamesh mastered them instantly. To master them at the level he has today required day after day of intense training to achieve the power he has today. What happened, Sabas? Asked Gilgamesh as he turned to his teacher. Sabas was really an teacher to Gilgamesh and he didn't mind admitting it. During all these years Sabas had taught him everything he could, he taught him about the supernatural world and everything he needed to know. He taught him the most diverse magics and forms of combat so that Gilgamesh could fight any enemy. Sabas taught him to adapt to any enemy he met, so that when Gilgamesh was in a life or death situation he could find a way to survive. Sabas was a brutal teacher, he literally hammered into Gilgamesh's body everything he needed, including making Gilgamesh go a week without sleep and training his body all the time. Sabas taught Gilgamesh everything he needed, but only taught him and gave him tips. If Gilgamesh wanted to master these skills it was up to him. The old man had absolute trust and loyalty in his disciple, and was willing to do anything to protect him. Sabas, although he looked very stiff on the outside, he was like a big marshmallow on the inside, always enjoying the house being bustling, although he always scolded Mordred. "You are trying hard enough, young master," said Sabas to Gilgamesh, who nodded. "Yes, I want to dominate her as soon as possible," Gilgamesh said to him. Sabas looked at Gilgamesh for a moment. "What's wrong? You don't look well," Sabas said to his disciple. Gilgamesh sighed as he knew he had no way to hide things from Sabas. "Only that I have a very bad feeling about what is to come," said Gilgamesh somberly. "I see, so how about we distract ourselves? How about a little battle?" says Sabas to Gilgamesh, who stares at him in surprise. "You want to fight with me, Sabas?" asks Gilgamesh with a teasing smile that the butler returns. "Unless you are afraid," speaks Sabas while teasing him. Gilgamesh smiles at that. "Very well," Gilgamesh said to him. They both moved away from each other and positioned themselves on top of the mountain. Gilgamesh and Sabas stared at each other as an aura enveloped them both. Gilgamesh's aura was golden and Sabas's was purple. Then they moved. The moment they planted their feet on the ground it was shattered as the two advanced against each other at high speed. The two seemed to have disappeared by speed and reappeared in the middle of the battlefield gliding. Gilgamesh punched Sabas in the face, who at the same time punched Gilgamesh in the face. The pressure caused by the blows made both of them move away before smashing into each other again. The impact was gigantic, the entire mountain trembled with the impact of their blows, the speed of their punches was almost impossible to see. Although Gilgamesh was stronger in raw power, Sabas had much more experience than him. Regardless of the blows that Gilgamesh used, Sabas was able to dodge and hit back, after all he was the one who trained Gilgamesh. In one move Sabas grabbed one of Gilgamesh's hands and delivered a strong kick to the body of the King of Heroes, causing him to be thrown into a mountain. The moment Gilgamesh crashed into the mountain he quickly shot towards Sabas. The butler quickly created dozens of purple orbs made of magic of destruction and launched them at Gilgamesh. His magic of destruction was a black hole that devours everything it touches without exception, and that was what was happening. Sabas' power surged forward, devouring everything in its path against Gilgamesh. The King of Heroes reached out his right hand and created a golden magic circle with several equations on it. It was the formula of Kankara. Using the formula of Kankara, Gilgamesh gained control of Sabas' power and redirected it against the butler while amplifying his power. Sabas simply put his magic of destruction into his arms and just punched the purple orb, sending him flying away. Gilgamesh advanced as he became a golden hold while advancing against Sabas, who smashed into Gilgamesh as he became a purple blur. Both collided in the air, causing shock waves that traveled over the entire dimension. Sabas had his body imbued with his magic of destruction, making his blows were overwhelmingly stronger than normal, and Gilgamesh had his body imbued with his Busashoku Haki, which increased his strength and endurance. Before Gilgamesh and Sabas collided, an immense roar caught their attention. They turned their gaze to the biggest mountain where the boss was and saw a huge dragon, bigger than any other, releasing its power into the sky. The dragon simply inflated its lungs and released a gigantic amount of flames against Sabas and Gilgamesh. Sabas simply released his magic of destruction against the dragon's flames, suppressing and nullifying them. Gilgamesh and Sabas exchanged glances before they set off against the dragon. Sabas advanced at blinding speed against the dragon, and in one swift blow Sabas tore off one of the legs of the dragon, which roared in pain and began to topple over. Gilgamesh advanced while his whole body was immersed in his Dragon Slayer aura, and he simply pierced the dragon's body, breaking it in half. The two landed on the ground next to each other. "So shall we continue?" asked Sabas to Gilgamesh. "No. There is something I am going to do now," said Gilgamesh to the butler, who nodded. "Speaking of which, where is Valerie?" asked Gilgamesh as he had not seen Domper. "She left a while ago," said Sabas to Gilgamesh, who nodded before disappearing in a teleportation, making the butler sigh. "I think I'll go tidy up this mess," said Sabas before starting. Some time later. With Gilgamesh. Currently it was possible to see Gilgamesh walking quietly through the city of Kuaha. It was already night and therefore there were few people on the streets. The reason Gilgamesh was here was only one. He is being followed. Gilgamesh knew that a few days ago he had begun to be followed, but he couldn't find who it was. Regardless of who this person was, he was very skilled and Gilgamesh had not been able to find her. Whenever Gilgamesh was near this missing person, Gilgamesh could only realize one thing. Divine power. A power that only the gods possess, a creature that trusts to be the most superior being in the world and the universe. Even one that has just been born possessing the power to destroy the city like a toy, a creature that all mankind salutes and kneels to. And if it is a god, this can be considered very dangerous. Even the weakest god had a power superior to a Satan-class demon. Gilgamesh was not afraid for him. Gilgamesh could easily deal with any god. The problematic thing was that gods were very inconsequential and did whatever they wanted. They were willing to do anything to achieve their goal, and their pride surpasses that of a demon. Gilgamesh looked around and saw that there were no people nearby. Quickly Gilgamesh planted his feet on the ground and shot off at divine speed towards the outside of Kuaha. When Gilgamesh stopped, he was in the middle of a large dense forest that was tens of miles away from Kuaha. Here Gilgamesh could fight and not worry about collateral damage. "Come out," shouts Gilgamesh as he increased his magic power. "How surprising, few people are able to sense me," said a voice coming out of the shadows of a tree. Gilgamesh turned his gaze to the being and saw a woman who had silver hair that was carefully tied in a ponytail, and her eyes looked like the moon. Her choice of clothing was quite simple, but it took nothing away from her beauty. As of now, she had a bow in her hands. Gilgamesh recognized the divine power emanating from her. She was a goddess. "Who are you?" asked Gilgamesh as he narrowed his eyes. "I am Artemis, the Greek goddess of the moon, hunting, nature, childbirth, chastity, and wild animals," said the goddess as she introduced herself. Gilgamesh narrowed his eyes. "What do you want, goddess of the hunt?" asked Gilgamesh seriously. "My father, the king of the Greek gods Zeus, has asked me to invite you to our faction," said Artemis to Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh replied instantly. "I have no interest," said Gilgamesh to her. "You don't have that option. Either you will come for good or for evil," said Artemis as she made a silver divine aura appear around her. "Choose your next words, goddess, carefully, for they may be your last," said Gilgamesh as his eyes glowed in power. Artemis did not wait. Her father had given her a mission and she would fulfill it. Artemis in an instant created an arrow and put it in her bow. Strengthened by her divine energy, she launched it at Gilgamesh at a speed faster than sound. Gilgamesh was not intimidated when a golden portal appeared around him and a sword came out at high speed and crashed into Artemis' arrow. An explosion was caused on impact that sent gusts of wind across the battlefield. Artemis did not stop as she began to fire countless amounts of arrows at Gilgamesh, each of which had been enhanced by her divine power. Artemis really deserved to be called goddess of the bow and arrow. Her dexterity was phenomenal. She fired dozens of arrows with great power at Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh only narrowed his eyes as he activated his Kanbunshoku Haki to anticipate each arrow. His Babylon gate opened behind him, a portal for each arrow before the treasures started coming out in great quantities. The moment the swords, clubs, spears and axes clashed against Artemis' arrows, causing explosions throughout the forest. Gilgamesh was not afraid to fight the goddess of the hunt, but he knew that Artemis was dangerous. Each of her arrows was imbued with a strong divine aura. These arrows could even kill Satan-class beings each. Artemis was a strong goddess, absolutely strong. In the novel she was able to fight Graphia, a devil possessing power comparable to a Mu, together with Fafnir a dragon king and with Asia healing them both, and even then Artemis had the advantage point too. When Artemis' arrows and Gilgamesh's treasures stopped being shot, it was revealed that part of the forest was now nothing but rubble. Seeing that her arrows were having no result, Artemis quickly dispersed her bow and took 2 hunting knives from her belt and set out to attack Gilgamesh. Artemis' explosive speed totally destroyed the tree she was standing on as she charged at Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh at the same time took off on her. Artemis in one swift movement tried to cut Gilgamesh in half, but the King of Heroes anticipated her move and grabbed Artemis' wrists to his surprise. "You're pretty strong for a human," said Artemis in surprise. Gilgamesh only gave a mischievous smile. "And you are quite weak for a goddess," said Gilgamesh teasingly as Artemis' gaze darkened. Artemis quickly tried to strike Gilgamesh but was thrown into the air by him and quickly adjusted her position as she came down on Gilgamesh with a powerful kick. The slap and shockwave was gigantic, shaking the ground and making the earth beneath Gilgamesh crack. Gilgamesh quickly grabbed the goddess' leg and threw her against a tree. Artemis quickly maneuvered herself into the air, and when she got her feet on the tree she fired at Gilgamesh to cut him down. Gilgamesh quickly took off on Artemis and they both began exchanging blows at high speed throughout the forest. The speed was such that they both became blurs, one golden and one silver. Gilgamesh frowned as he realized that Artemis was getting stronger and faster with time. As the two of them walked away, Gilgamesh noticed that the glow of the moon was getting stronger and stronger, and then he understood what was happening. Artemis was the moon goddess, and so she would get stronger during the full moon night. It would be similar to Gilgamesh's sunshine, however it only gave an increase in her physical abilities temporarily, nowhere near as powerful as Gilgamesh's ability. Artemis quickly prepared her knives while imbuing them with a great silver aura. Seeing this, Gilgamesh quickly summoned a sword. In an instant a light emerged from Gilgamesh's right hand, causing the moon goddess to stop for a moment. The light was unlike any light she had seen so far. When the light was over, a sword was in Gilgamesh's hand. It was the Western sword with a length of 90 centimeters and a width of 12 centimeters. It was Caliban, the sword that had the right to choose a king, once wielded by King Arthur to free his country, the weapon that became the symbol of the King of the Knights of England, a sword that had a light that surpassed even that of an archangel of heaven. Artemis quickly fired at Gilgamesh with all possible speed. Gilgamesh wielded Caliban before firing at Artemis. Both began exchanging blows at high speed, Artemis demonstrating surreal skill with her knives and Gilgamesh matching them with his sword. In one swift movement Gilgamesh threw Artemis away, who scattered her knives and summoned her bow and unleashed countless arrows against Gilgamesh, all imbued with her divine aura. Gilgamesh simply raised his sword. "Sword of selection, grant me power. Divide the wicked." Caliban. A beam of light arose the moment Gilgamesh slid down the sword of the victorious, pure power of light and holy that would kill even Satan in one blow, and fired against the thousands of arrows of Artemis. There was no comparison. The sacred light of Caliban shot out, annihilating all the arrows and exploding at Artemis, who was wide-eyed. Artemis simply jumped to dodge the sacred wave of the sword of the victorious, which advanced, destroying part of the forest. Gilgamesh in an instant was in front of Artemis, who stared wide-eyed when Gilgamesh lowered Caliban against her, who, thanks to his centuries of experience, managed to narrowly avoid it. When Artemis landed, she couldn't help but be surprised when a large deep cut had appeared on her left arm where blood was leaking out. Artemis turned her gaze to Gilgamesh and her eyes widened when she saw Gilgamesh with Caliban raised as he glowed in a sacred aura about to be released. Artemis tried to move, but her eyes widened when she realized that the ground below her had become quicksand, preventing her from moving. Artemis prepared herself for the blow, but her eyes widened as she felt a familiar energy approaching. Just as Gilgamesh was about to launch Caliban at Artemis, he stared wide-eyed as he looked up to see dozens of weapons raining down on him. Gilgamesh quickly jumped away to dodge the rain of steel and unleashed all the accumulated power of the sword against him. Caliban. A wave of sacred energy shot out at the weapons, destroying them. A few seconds later an explosion appeared next to Artemis as another divine presence was revealed. When the dust subsided, it was possible to see a man who had an overly muscular body. On his head was a Spartan war helmet and strapped to his back was a valuable war hammer. His face was full of scars and an eternal scowl that made him look like some kind of gangster. His eyes were as red as fire. The man emanated a divine aura that radiated bloodlust and brutal power. "Looks like you are in trouble, Slayer," said the man with a sarcastic smile, earning a growl from Artemis. "What are you doing here, Ares?" asked Artemis to the now revealed god of war. It was Ares, the Greek god of war, son of Zeus and his wife Hera, and one of the 12 chief gods of Olympus. "Zeus sent me here as he had bad feelings about this, and it looks like he is right," said Ares with a big smile. Artemis in one swift movement pulled her leg out of the sand and positioned herself next to Ares. "It pains me to say this, but to win it we must fight together," said Artemis as she summoned her bow. Ares simply gave a delighted smile as an aura of flames surged around him as he picked up his warhammer. Gilgamesh narrowed his eyes as he summoned another sword in his left hand. Gilgamesh narrowed his eyes as he summoned another sword in his left hand. Its shape was unique, but it could be classified as a broadsword. The edge was gem-like blue, followed by gold adorning the tip. The guard was semicircular on the left side of the handle that extended to the bottom just above the pommel, with a small stippling on the right side of the handle. It was a sword that claimed to be unmatched, a sword that claimed 100,000 men alive, it was a sword that believed it was capable of cutting anything with it, a sword that believed it was capable of creating a miracle, a sword that was a divine construct. Rising into the sky his power, he was already free of his cage. The sword already in his hand, used to be a beautiful, unmatched, unbreakable, and sacred sword. Even capable of granting miracles. Durandal was the sacred sword of Roland, one of Charlemagne's paladins. The two sacred swords beautifully forged by God were being wielded by Gilgamesh. The two gods excited when they felt the power of the two swords. Ares was the first to advance brutally against Gilgamesh while Artemis prepared her bow. Ares advanced against Gilgamesh as he raised his hammer and brought it down against Gilgamesh with enough force to crush Satan-class beings. The King of Heroes raised Durandal and fired at Ares' war hammer, causing divine auras to be released all over the place. Gilgamesh in one swift thrust threw Ares away only to have to dodge Artemis' arrows. Ares in one swift motion hurled his hammer at Gilgamesh, who defended with Caliban. Quickly Gilgamesh swung Durandal, releasing his sacred aura, making a large cut on Ares' chest that spat blood. The god of war smiled wildly as he swung his hammer at Gilgamesh, who defended with Caliban but was thrown flying into the trees. Artemis quickly seized this opportunity and launched a hail of arrows at Gilgamesh. The King of Heroes simply swung Caliban, throwing a wave of light that vaporized all the arrows in an instant before Gilgamesh touched the ground and shot Ares. Both began an intense and brutal exchange of blows. If Artemis is a goddess who takes advantage of every move, moving as if she were dancing on the battlefield and with incredible dexterity and agility, the god of war was the opposite. Ares was a brutal fighter, he used no technique and only fought with his instinct for war and battle, being brutal and hitting where he must hit and knew when to do so. The gods of war in all mythologies were extremely feared, even if sometimes they were not among the strongest, their skills and expertise in battle managed to make them something to be feared. But all this was useless against Gilgamesh, who quickly overpowered Ares and with one blow of Durandal sent the god of war flying. Ares quickly moved into position and raised his hands, summoning dozens of weapons and hurling them at Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh's eyes darkened at this. How dare Ares try to rain weapons down on him? This was his business. Gilgamesh didn't even hesitate when he swung Durandal, sending a strong wave of sacred energy that destroyed all the weapons. Artemis took this opportunity to advance against Gilgamesh, but a single blow from Caliban sent her flying away. Gilgamesh prepared to advance against the two, but stopped halfway, surprising the two gods. Gilgamesh's eyes widened as he turned his attention towards Kuaha. Gilgamesh was a great senser, and from here he could still sense Valerie's power due to him having placed a protection rune. And he was feeling Valerie's magic power diminishing, and that could only mean one thing. Valerie was in danger. Gilgamesh quickly turned his attention away from the recovering gods, and dissipated his swords as he shot toward Kuaha as quickly as possible. However, before Gilgamesh rose into the sky, Artemis and Ares stood in front of him. "Where do you think you are going?" asked Ares as he regenerated. Gilgamesh's gaze darkened as he took off on them both. Artemis was the first to shoot at Gilgamesh, trying to hit him with a punch. Gilgamesh held her hand, much to the goddess' surprise, before kneeing her in the stomach, causing the goddess to spit blood as her ribs broke, and in one swift elbow Gilgamesh struck Artemis' head, knocking her out and sending her crashing into a mountain. In an instant Gilgamesh appeared in front of a surprised war god and threw a punch so hard that it pierced the war god's chest. It was not fatal, but he would be seriously injured. In one quick movement Gilgamesh knocked out the war god, sending him flying into a mountain. In just 4 moves Gilgamesh had defeated both gods. Gilgamesh quickly shot off in the direction he felt Valerie's energy. He would only hope to arrive in time. A few minutes earlier. With Valerie. Valerie was calmly walking through the town. He had left the house as he was going to buy some things. Valerie had gone out to buy some things for home, and mainly sweets. Valerie loved candy more than anyone. It had been the first thing she had eaten when Gilgamesh had rescued her from the Thebes faction 2 years ago. Although she liked the sweets that were made by Gilgamesh better, she was content with this one. Valerie walked for a few more meters before she stopped. The whole sky had taken on a purple tint. She was in a barrier. 2 presences appeared behind Valerie, who turned her attention to them. They were a man and a woman. The woman was about 20 years old with short hair adorned with several ribbons. She wears a purple gothic Lolita outfit. The man was a young man in glasses with blonde hair and a lock of hair covering his face, who usually wears a business suit and had a sword around his waist. It was Walburga and Arthur. The woman had a malicious look on her face. Arthur, on the other hand, seemed to have something different about him. His eyes seemed to be almost blank, as if he wasn't really there. "Who are you?" asked Valerie as she looked at the two of them. "Nice to meet you, Valerie-chan. I am Walburga and this is Arthur," said Walburga with a smile. What do you want with me? Asked Valerie as she looked at them. Oh, don't be like that, we finally met after you ran away, Gralchan said Walburga cheerfully. Valerie frowned, especially at the way she was called. Are you Rezevim's ally? Asked Valerie. Obviously she knows all about Rezevim's plans with his long news due to Gilgamesh telling her. Walburga put a hand on her chin and made a cute expression. Well, it's not entirely right, but it's not wrong either. I don't work for him, but my leader is an ally of old Rizkun, they both have an interest in the Holy Grail, Walburga said as she waved her hands. Do you really think you will just walk out of here alive? Asked Valerie as her magic power began to circulate through her body. Of course I do. After all, your friend is very busy right now dealing with a goddess, said Walburga with an expression that worried Valerie. Now let's get started, Gralchan. Arthur, please, said Walburga smiling. Chapter 143. Arthur without a word drew his sword and raised it towards the sky and turned it towards Valerie, and without a word, unleashed a high-powered holy wave towards Dumper. Valerie's eyes widened as she saw the wave of holy energy and she quickly extended her right hand and created dozens of protective magic circles. The circles were gigantic. The sacred energy wave advanced, destroying the first layers, but for each layer destroyed, Valerie recreated 3 to protect herself. Slowly the sacred energy wave lost its power and disappeared to Walburga's surprise. Why, it looks like the little girl has learned some tricks, said Walburga in surprise. Arthur in an instant took off on Valerie at blinding speed at the Dumper. Valerie's eyes widened and at the last moment she dodged the blow that launched waves of sacred energy. Quickly Valerie used her blood manipulation to create a sword and threw it at Arthur, pushing him away. Extending her hand, Valerie created dozens of magic circles that cast magic waves at Arthur, who stepped back and released a wave of sacred energy from his sword, nullifying it. Valerie analyzed Arthur's sword for a moment. Sacred sword. Valerie bit her lower lip as she noticed this. Yes, it is definitely a sacred sword, but what sacred sword is, seems stronger than the average sacred sword. It's not Durandal, could it be an Excalibur? Maybe, no, Excalibur was broken into 7 fragments, and this feeling of that blade, no, it could not be, the sword of the Holy King, Caliban. Deducing the sword, Walburga didn't even deny it. The ultimate sword for slaying demons and dark beings. Valerie noted that this now got very complicated. Sacred swords were lethal to dark beings and Valerie was a Dumper, a hybrid of human and vampire. Although she didn't have as much weakness as a normal vampire, she was still lethal. And this was no ordinary holy sword, it was Caliban, the strongest holy sword that surpasses even Durandal and the original Excalibur, a sword that can even manipulate space. This was dangerous, but the strangest thing was about Arthur. He seemed to be in a trance, almost as if he was being manipulated. Valerie's attention was drawn to the two who began to attack. Walburga extended her hands, creating dozens of elemental magic circles. Bursts of fire, lightning, earth, air, ice, and even light and darkness were fired at Valerie, while at the same time Arthur released a wave of holy energy against her. Valerie quickly extended her hands and created dozens of magic circles pointing at Walburga that release large amounts of flames, ice, water, lightning, storms and darkness. She is also casting elemental magic spells of the forbidden type to create a skull of purple flames, cyclones of curses and black lightning. As her spells clashed, Valerie created dozens of magical barriers that nullified the Caliban waves. Valerie's eyes widened as she saw Arthur lift Caliban and create an entirely greater amount of holy aura than before and shot at Valerie. Valerie extended her hand, creating a magic circle and gained control of the sacred aura before calling her magic. Reverse, called Valerie as she activated her magic. Suddenly the entire wave of holy energy was transformed into darkness, much to the surprise of Walburga and even Arthur. Reverse is a special kind of magic that is able to reverse the characteristics and effects of various spells and objects such as sacred gears, and spells causing a reverse effect. This is what Valerie did by turning the sacred aura of light into darkness. Manipulating the darkness, they quickly advanced against the two who defended themselves. Walburga created magical circles of protection while Arthur released a wave of sacred energy. The moment the explosions happened, a cloud of dust was raised and Arthur took this opportunity to advance against Valerie. Quickly Valerie reached out her hand, creating a magic circle that released great flames that shot forward, burning everything in their path. Arthur didn't hesitate and cut through all the flames until he stepped on a spot that made Valerie smile. In an instant a magic circle appeared on Arthur's feet as he was brought to his knees by the increased gravity. Damn it, cried Walburga as she got ready. However, before she did anything, Valerie looked at her and smiled. I don't think so, said Valerie as she held out her hand to Walburga. A 5-layer magic circle appeared, trapping Walburga, who could only scream when a huge bolt of lightning struck her. But before Walburga was fried, Arthur stabbed Caliban into the ground, who released a torrent of holy aura that broke Valerie's magic circle, and he advanced against Walburga, cutting the magic circles that bound her. Valerie snapped her fingers as she prepared to attack again, but was interrupted by Arthur, who literally cut through space and made a gap appear behind Valerie, releasing a wave of sacred energy at close range. Valerie quickly created a protective magic circle that managed to contain only part of the impact before Valerie backed away. However, Walburga took this chance to enter from the right side and release many kinds of magic on her in some kind of big burst of it. The magic varied from fire, ice, lightning, water, even darkness, and light, all being fired at her in a single point to knock her down. Valerie extended her other hand creating a protective magic circle that defended part of the attack but sent Valerie who can only stare wide-eyed as she saw Arthur appear in front of her and strike her launching her flying. Valerie quickly skidded before falling to the ground as she spat blood and saw a small cut from Caliban on her arm and applied healing magic to keep from getting serious. "So you surrender, Grawl-chan?" asked Walburga as she floated over and smiled at Valerie. Arthur had the same emotionless face. Valerie only smiled confusingly at Walburga. "Well, I'm not alone," said Valerie smiling. Walburga widened her eyes only to look back and see something she did not expect. Above Walburga, in the air, was Mordred with a fierce smile on her face as she was wearing her armor and had Clarent in hand. In a single motion Mordred lowered Clarent against Walburga who could only create circle of protection before being thrown hard against the ground. Arthur seeing this quickly tried to move forward to protect Walburga, however in the middle of the way Arturia appeared wearing all his armor while having Excalibur in hand. Arturia simply struck a blow with Excalibur which Arthur defended but was sent flying backwards. The moment he landed and prepared to advance he had to stop when in an instant Karna was behind him with her spear at his neck with a very clear warning. "If you move I will kill you," Karna said seriously. Mordred advanced trying to cut Walburga in half, but at the last moment the witch used teleportation magic and dodged. "TSC, bitch," curses Mordred as he turns his gaze to her. Walburga had a large cut on her arm that was leaking blood. Behind Valerie came Sabas, Inkiju, and Fenrir and by the looks on their faces all of them were not in a good mood. "Are you okay, Valerie?" asked Inkiju to the dumper. "No problem," said Valerie as she stood up. "Where is Gil?" asked Inkiju. "His friend should have gotten here quickly, they took so long because there was a very strong barrier around this place and so it got in the way of Valerie's location. He was lured into a trap, they wanted to get him away from me, he is fighting a goddess now," said Valerie making everyone surprised. Everyone's surprise ended when they turned their attention to Walburga who was laughing. "Looks like the little girl has some pretty strong friends, and not just the king of heroes," said Walburga laughing. "You think you're going to make it out of here alive?" Which speaks Arturia darkly. For Arturia the dumper was a very important person who helped her get used to this world, and as long as the king of knights was breathing she was not going to allow them to hurt Valerie. "Well, take them one at a time, I could still do it, but all of them? No," Walburga said arrogantly. "As if you could," witch shouts Mordred angrily. "Don't try to resist, witch, that will be worse for you," said Inkiju as his aura surrounded his body. "Well, wouldn't it be better if you went to help your leader, after all he must not be very well," said Walburga expecting some reaction from them, but was surprised when nothing happened. "I think you got it wrong, if anyone needs help it would be the gods," said Inkiju as he smiled. Walburga didn't understand but her eyes widened as she felt a strong magical power approaching. In an instant a golden blur hit the ground making everything shake a bit. When the dust settled down Gilgamesh was revealed and by the look on his face he was not happy. "See how? You should be fighting Artemis," cries Walburga perplexed. "Do you really think a mere goddess could stop me?" says Gilgamesh in his somber voice. Gilgamesh turned his gaze and saw that Valerie was fine and sighed. "You will not leave here," said Gilgamesh as he got ready. Gilgamesh's entire group prepared to move forward and Walburga realized what a terrible situation she was in. In an instant she released a wave of magical energy against Gilgamesh who nullified her with his divine power. In an instant Walburga teleported behind Karna who noticed and struck her with the spear, but Arthur who was now free defended the blow and was sent flying into a house. Walburga quickly protected him with a magic circle before standing next to him. Just as Walburga was about to smile victoriously she spat out blood when a huge gash appeared all over her body. "Be bastard!" shouted Walburga to Karna who had cut her the moment she teleported away. In an instant Fenrir took off on them with the intention of cutting them off, however before that Arthur released a wave of sacred energy that made the wolf retreat and before anyone could reach them Walburga created a magical teleportation circle. "I'm coming back for you," shouts Walburga to Valerie before disappearing with Arthur. Everyone sighed as they turned their attention back to Valerie. "I'm fine guys," said Valerie as she received all the attention while smiling. Karna approached Gilgamesh and bowed slightly. "Forgive me for letting them get away," Karna said with a bit of regret in her voice. Gilgamesh denied it. "No problem, the most important thing is for us to take care of Valerie," said Gilgamesh as he went to help Dumper. He had the impression that this was just beginning. Gilgamesh's home. Everyone had quickly returned home where Asia was waiting for them with Tiamat who stayed to protect the girl. Asia quickly healed Valerie of any injuries. Valerie told them everything that had happened. "Do you think it was Rizevim?" asked Gilgamesh to Valerie. Everyone there knew about Valerie's past and so they were alert. Gilgamesh knew that it would not take long for Rezevim to come after them. The reason he had not come until now was that Lucifer's son did not know of Valerie's location, which was vital to his plans. Gilgamesh was already preparing an attack to kill Lucifer's son once and for all after the events of the third season. This is why he summoned Karna. Rezevim and his group were strong. He was a super devil with power to rival gods and still had an army of vampires and other beings, plus Euclid who were a Satan-class demon. But most dangerous were the evil dragons who were Rezevim's allies. Gilgamesh didn't know if he had already been revived, but he couldn't help but worry. Especially with Apophis, Azadea, and Krom Kruik who had reached the heavenly dragon class. I don't think it was him. Rezevim would be much more brutal, but it seems that the witch leader is allied with Rezevim, informed Valerie. Everyone nodded. Gilgamesh turned his gaze to Karna. From today on you must protect Valerie from anything, while I am not with her you must protect her. They probably tried again, said Gilgamesh to Surya's son, who nodded. Understood, said Karna inexpressively. So the one who attacked was that Walburga and Arthur, spoke Mordred without remembering who they were. Yes. Walburga is a very famous magician and Arthur is the wielder of the sacred sword Caliban, said Gilgamesh to everyone's surprise, especially to Mordred and Arturia. Caliban? Wasn't it destroyed? Asked Arturia in surprise. Not in this world. Here Caliban was never destroyed but stayed with the Pendragon family after King Arthur died. The Arthur who attacked is a descendant of King Arthur of this world, said Gilgamesh to Arturia and Mordred, who stared in surprise. And is it strong? Asked Mordred. Yes, Caliban is considered the strongest sacred sword this world. It is superior to Durandal and Excalibur and can also manipulate space, Gilgamesh said to the two. Arturia was very surprised by this, as she had not imagined this, and more surprised to learn that this Caliban can manipulate space. Although she really doesn't consider the Excalibur of this world worthy to be compared to hers. Gilgamesh, we have entry, said Inkiju, noticing someone approaching. Oh no. What's that? Another attack, asked Asia in despair. Another enemy, asked Gilgamesh. It's none of the signatures from before, but it looks strong to me. Maybe we should go and investigate it. Gilgamesh nodded, as a fluffy scream, accompanied by a large thumping sound, came from outside. He headed toward the window and looked out. He was taken aback. I don't think it's an enemy. Then what is it? Valerie asked curiously. Gilgamesh let out a small laugh. Well, it's a beautiful girl. Everyone quickly went to look. Walking to the window, they looked out at the handsome blonde-haired mage whose face was eating the floor. Let's go see, said Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh opened the door and walked out with the others following behind. The young woman in question lifted her body, brushing the dust off her clothes. Oh man, forced landing. That was not in the plans. Gilgamesh pulled forward. Excuse me, magic girl. The girl paused in her movements with her voice. Her eyes rose to meet Gilgamesh's. Oh my god, am I dreaming now? Did that fall knock me unconscious? Wait, this city is... Mumbling incoherently, Gilgamesh gently stroked his head as he was surprised to see who it was. My name is Dash. Gilgamesh say ma. She let out a feminine cry. Oh my god. It's you after all. Gilgamesh-sama. I must have gone to Kua without even realizing it. I was just following my brother's trail and ended up with Gilgamesh say ma. I guess you know who I am then. He laughed, with the young woman's lower lip trembling. See clearly, my name is Ellie Fei. Gilgamesh was surprised to find out who it was, but it kind of explains the fact that Arthur is attacking them and seems to be being manipulated. Oh, Ellie Fei-san, it's a pleasure to meet you face to face. Did you get my recent letter? Ellie Fei jumped up and down on the spot, unable to imagine a life in which Gilgamesh would speak to her so casually, nodding so quickly that her neck nearly broke. Valerie gained a clueless face. Wait, Gilgamesh knows her. She's a fan of his. Inkiju replied as he tilted his head. I believe she is in Gilgamesh's fan club. And he has a fan club? Can I join? Asked Asia innocently. Inkiju nodded to the girl who smiled. Gee Gilgamesh-sama, that's been a dream of mine, but, I also, well, I need to think about, oh god, Gilgamesh-sama. Gilgamesh-sama. Gilgamesh went to approach her. When he noticed on her body, there were some marks. It looked like she had been hurt, so he bent down towards her, and gave a gentle smile. You are hurt. Come with me, I'll send Asia to heal you, okay? Then you can tell us what happened. Ellie Fei laughed uneasily and started to walk forward, when her legs gave way, folding under her. Gilgamesh reached out and caught her in his arms, lifting her up, so he was carrying her bridal style. Oh my god, a dream of mine has come true. Being carried by Gilgamesh-sama, to be held by Gilgamesh-sama. I must be dreaming, it doesn't happen in real life. Gilgamesh-sama's arms are so strong and comforting. After all the pictures I took of Gilgamesh-sama from images, it seems so surreal. He, I even get carried away by Gilgamesh-sama. Li Fei's face turned red. The heat in his chest grew hotter and hotter. Being carried by Gilgamesh was a true dream of hers, a dream she didn't want to end. Gilgamesh was perplexed and began to move. It seemed that Li Fei needed help, and if it would help he would understand what was happening to Arthur and the attack he would make. After taking Li Fei into the house, Asia began to make sure that she was examined while the others did other things in case they needed to defend themselves, although they were almost certain that the threat at the moment was over. As they did this, Gilgamesh witnessed Li Fei staring at him with an admiring smile on her face, and also twiddling her thumbs repeatedly. It seemed that she had a mixture of nervousness and excitement inside her, mixed with sadness. It was a combination that Gilgamesh had not really witnessed before. Although he was wondering exactly what had happened for Li Fei to be like this. So, Li Fei-san, how about explaining dash? Before he could continue, Li Fei quickly spoke up. Gilgamesh-sama. First of all, I am so sorry for what happened. With all that's going on, I have to say that I'm sorry for bringing this trouble to your door. It was not my intention in the least. And Unii-sama, he didn't mean to hurt you. He doesn't know what he's doing. Gilgamesh exhaled slowly, seeing that Li Fei seemed to be panicking about the situation at hand. Gilgamesh also knew that Arthur was Li Fei's brother from what the girl had told him through her letters, and from what he already knew from the anime, and he also knew what happened to Li Fei and Arthur from what the girl told him and about this mysterious enemy. I don't blame you or your Unii-sama for what happened. It seems that the enemy targeted you for a very specific reason. Your skills with a blade are undeniable. Your sword is the strongest holy sword in existence. It makes sense that he wants you in his group. But to control you, leaves little room in my mind for someone capable of something like that, said Gilgamesh. To think that someone was capable of manipulating someone like that, Gilgamesh was really surprised that something like that existed. Gilgamesh even admits that he thought it was like his Kota Amatsukami, but it was quite different. Li Fei's head lowered, thinking of her brother and what happened when she disappeared, the regret and anguish that was on her face. I ran away. I was a coward. Unii-sama told me to run, but he stayed behind, and my cowardly actions. If you had stayed, would the outcome have changed? Gilgamesh's words made Li Fei begin to think about what he had said. Well, no, probably not. But still, that man is very powerful from what you have told me. If you had been captured, you couldn't have gathered allies to fight him, to expose what he intends to do. Li Fei's eyes began to water, his small body trembling from side to side. I lost Unii-sama, and now if he dies. Seeing the young woman in distress, Asia went to give her a comforting hug, when Inkiju gasped. He's not going to kill you. Inkiju interrupted, he clearly needs his Unii-sama for something. Until he has that something, he will keep Arthur Pendragon around. It seems he desires strong warriors. Gilgamesh nodded at what Inkiju said, and then continued. He's right, Li Fei. You are not to blame for this. Your Unii-sama must have really loved you if he stayed to fight a losing battle, to protect you. In my eyes, he did a very noble job and self-sacrifice, and it was worth it, since you're safe. Here Gilgamesh sat next to the young woman, putting his hand on her head. We're going to save you, right? No matter what happens. We'll find out more information and find him, I promise. Until then, you can stay here. Sabas, you'll get a room, right? Yes, leave it to me, young master. Sabas bowed his head as he said this, giving Li Fei a gentle smile, Li Fei being touched by the act of kindness, so much so that she was on the verge of shedding tears. Gilgamesh nodded gratefully, then turned to Li Fei once again. You are no longer alone, we will stand right beside you and do what we can to return your Unii-sama. Until then, you can stay with us, no problem. If you need anything, just ask. Li Fei's eyes filled with tears. All these acts of kindness were too much for the young woman. She didn't think she deserved all this kindness. With Arthur attacking them under control, with her just showing up like this and putting a burden on the whole group, it was something she couldn't understand. Much thanks. Li Fei collapsed onto Gilgamesh's chest and cried. Well, I think we should go to bed, we have a busy day tomorrow and we will look into this, Gilgamesh said to them. They started nodding and Sabas walked over to Li Fei. If you want to follow me, I will put you in one of our guest rooms.